Okay, good morning or good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Our webinar today is entitled Increase Service Revenue with Predictive Intelligence, and we're really happy to have with us our partner, Entitle, today, and I'll be introducing our speaker from Entitle as well in just a moment. My name is Nicole Sanders, and I'm just going to run the technical side of today's event. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I'll run through just a few logistics. I'm sure many of you have participated in webinars, but I know every technology is a little different, so to orient you to make sure it's the best presentation experience. So right now you should be logged into WebEx and you can see our opening slide. There's a green bar at the top of your screen. If you hover over that, you have the option to chat with the host, myself, or submit a question using the Q&A panel. And we do recommend you submit your questions as the presentation is going so that those are queued up when it comes time to address those questions at the Q&A time. So we are recording today's presentation, and we will make it available to all of you in the next few days. We'll send a follow-up email to those who are participating, and feel free to share it with your colleagues. So I'll go ahead and introduce our speakers today. First, Jonathan Skelding will kick off the presentation. And Jonathan is the Senior Director of Technical Alliances here at ServiceMax. He's just going to give a quick introduction of ServiceMax and how the field service landscape is evolving. And following that, Vivek Joshi, the CEO of Entitle, is going to talk about how service organizations can really leverage their service data to grow service revenue. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan to get us started.
Thank you, Nicole. The ServiceMax mission remains focused on empowering the field service technician. Our solutions help them deliver flawless field service in companies of all sizes and industries. These products help businesses unleash the untapped growth potential of service in their service business. Flawless field service. The story starts at the beginning, the delivery and installation of the product, and continues through the entire life cycle. The right person at the right location with the right skills, the right parts, and the right knowledge to fix the problem the first time, which all leads to delighted customers. All the time the product is in service, there are revenue generation opportunities, and that is the focus of today's webinar, enabling field service organizations to transition away from cost centers, find new sources of revenue, and contribute increasing recurring revenue streams. We deliver this with a comprehensive suite of capabilities that enable end-to-end field service processes augmented by a comprehensive partner ecosystem. ServiceMax revolutionized field service software with our cloud and mobile offerings, but these are now table stakes in the market. A year ago, we launched our technology marketplace, bringing best-of-breed partners to meet our customers' business needs. With the platform in place, we can now help our customers connect their devices into their service solution and derive valuable insights from this data that drive service improvement, customer delight, and additional revenue opportunities, ultimately transforming field service operations to support servitization and outcome-based field service. So with that, I'm delighted to have Vivek Joshi, CEO of Entitle, with us today to talk to you about how you can use predictive analytics to source more service revenue. Vivek has a long history working with field service organizations, so he's perfectly equipped to talk to you all about this topic.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate the introduction and invitation to share with our audience today how we can help service organizations grow revenue, not just improve the lives of their customers. As Jonathan said, I'm the CEO of Entitle. We're a company based in Mountain View, California, and we have a purpose-built application, predictive analytics and machine learning application for aftermarket service sales. The company has deep domain knowledge in services. All of us are veterans of service organizations, and this is what the foundation of the company is built on. And like ServiceMax, we deliver our software through the cloud. We joined the ServiceMax marketplace not too long ago for a couple of simple reasons. When I was a service practitioner many years ago, it seems very obvious that some of the things that ServiceMax is doing today needed to get done. But until they came around, there simply was an absence in the marketplace of that solution. ServiceMax has turned out to be a clear leader in this field, and for us, providing this complementary solution was a no-brainer, and joining the marketplace therefore made perfect sense to us. So we're very glad to be here with you today, Jonathan. I want to share a few thoughts with you. There's about 4 items I want you to take away from today's discussion. First and foremost, a concept of an aftermarket sales maturity model and where we go from reactive to proactive. Along the way, I want to share with you some of the challenges for aftermarket sales that we've seen in the marketplace and we hear from our customers every day. I want to then explain how entitlement automation can help you in this process, and then finally, a bit of how it all works, how entitlement automation works in practice. Fundamentally, what our mission was built to be is to make aftermarket a habit. It has to be something unconscious. It has to be something that automatically comes to you, not something that's forced. And to make a habit happen, a number of things have to come together, and we believe entitlement automation is a big part of that. We have an entitlement maturity model, a sales maturity model that we've depicted on this page. If you consider the initial starting point being reactive, where most of us in service organizations react to a customer event, react to a customer call, that's the starting point of the evolution. But as you go through this progression of this maturity model, you go along different ways. We recognize as you go along that, maybe there's a better way to contact customers. But invariably, there is no customer segmentation either by use or by industry or by type of application. So very often what happens is people start dialing for dollars the old-fashioned way. You don't have any discrimination or discernment among customer types, and therefore you just call everybody. As you go along, you start getting a little sophisticated, a bit more savvy, and there's an ability to start thinking about analyzing historical data, because we all recognize historical data, be it field service data, be it product data, has a lot of insights hidden in there. But it is like looking for a needle in a haystack if you don't have the right tools and the right practices. Finally, when you get to the point of automation, you know that you have to do it because, let's face it, it tends to be a very tedious, very time-consuming, labor-intensive process. So automation is the next step, but you can't do this automation correctly if you don't have the right mindset and right practices in place. So this is the aftermarket maturity model that we've created to share with our audience and share with our customers how to think of the progression to go from reactive to proactive. This is something that we feel can be done, but we've also seen things that are done the incredibly hard way. We just had a conversation with one of our customers recently. It's a large global company, a hardware manufacturer, multi-billion-dollar company, and they explained to us how they made this progression themselves. What is astounding to us was it took them 6 data scientists, 2 business analysts in 2 years, which means many millions of dollars, to get to the point where they feel they can now make the leap from reactive to proactive. Now, we all know that not every company can make this investment. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. They clearly thought that this is important enough for them to make this investment. But candidly, this is not something that's easy for everybody to do, right? So what happens invariably is that most companies look at this stuff, they realize the amount of work that needs to get done, and they just wind up simply doing nothing and revert back to being reactive, right? And by the way, most companies tend to be in that frame of mind because it's simply too hard to do. We therefore recognize this, and I recognized this when I was in services, that there's a huge amount of missed opportunities that we all give up. There's a lot of hidden entitlements. A lot of our customers we know ought to be buying more from us, ought to be doing more with us, but because it's so hard, these opportunities just simply go begging. We think predictive analytics is a way to maximize the gain while minimizing this pain. That's fundamentally what this is about. We think there's ways to get after information that exists in your systems, that exists within the databases of the different systems in the company to start using for predictive analytics. If you think about the maturity model, we think predictive analytics is therefore the next stage of the maturity model, the next level. To get from reactive to proactive, there's 3 different things that happen along the way as you get to predictive. We need to know who needs what and when. That's really an important aspect of being predictive. It's not just knowing that there's a customer there, but is this a really right time? As Jonathan said in his opening remarks, the right offering for the right customer, the right time, and the right place. It's really critical. And it's important in services because, as we all know, if you don't get to your customer on time, that demand is what we call perishable. It just goes away. They'll either buy it from a competitor or a third party, or they'll simply do the work themselves. So it's really important to know who to contact and when. The second thing is being able to provide actionable insights. It's not just important to know who to contact and for what, but what do you do with it? Is this a replacement part? Is this a preventive maintenance campaign? Is this a new consumable opportunity? There's different things you can go along the way to do this thing. And finally, to go back along this continuum, we need to make this systematic and scalable. There's so many one-off efforts that we've seen. Companies, just like the example I gave you earlier, spend thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, if you may, in terms of creating one-off efforts. But this is not scalable. You have spreadsheets everywhere. You have one-off applications that simply are riddled with errors and can't be translated from person to person. So we believe that this is a way to kind of get after the next stage of the opportunity maturity model. What I want to share with you now for the next few minutes is what we think are the fundamentals of entitlement automation. This is a category that we've created for you, the service practitioner, to know what entitlements you can go after in your customer base and what you can do and when you can do this. There are many elements to it, but I'm going to focus on just three. It's the predictive aspects, it's proactive elements, and then finally the preemptive aspect. You know, as service practitioners, we have, as I say, three different prizes that we like to look at as the priorities. Now, there's many different things we like to do, but there's certainly three main items we like to go after. First is, how can we turn a service call into a sales call? Now, it doesn't mean you turn a service technician into a salesperson, but how do you equip him or her with this right information about the context about what's going on at the service site? You know, when I was in services, many of my peers, the common refrain I heard always was, how can we provide this information to my tech when he's in the field? What can she do when she's at the customer plant fixing something to go about identifying new opportunities? And that's one of the biggest things, being predictive about this stuff. The second thing that matters is being proactive. And I think this is a statement, the paradigm shift, I think, is a big deal. Now, I heard this statement from, again, one of my other customers who said, Vivek, services tends to live in a world where a customer's bad day is our good day. And that's a shame. We all know what that means. Something went down. There was an unplanned interruption, which means you need field service, you need spare parts, you need special services out there. Now, that's all good for us as service practitioners, but it's really bad for the customer. How about turning that into a customer's good day is a good day, which means you have to be proactive about it. You have to get out in front of these issues and kind of beat them to the punch in terms of not being able to go down. Finally, this is the part of the next phase of proactive. You be preemptive, right? Get out, identify these opportunities, identify these issues, and prevent outages before they happen. This is all what we all aim for. This is nirvana. This is what the goal of every service practitioner is and every customer. And if you do that, we clearly have an opportunity to win the hearts and minds of our customers. Let me just share with you an example of how this all comes together. You know, we recently worked with a pump manufacturer called Hayward. It's a mid-sized industrial pump and mixer company based in Canada. They have a huge install base of pumps and mixers around the world in all kinds of different industries. They felt that their revenue from spare parts and preventive maintenance services is well below what we call entitlement value. In their mind, orders were taken. There was no proactive pursuit of opportunities. There was a very manual process in place. And on top of that, they simply had no contextual view of what was going on the customer. The other thing that happened is, like most manufacturers, durable goods manufacturers, their lead times are pretty long. So if something went wrong in a pump or a mixer and a customer called in, you potentially had the chance of the line being down for many weeks while this part was manufactured and replaced. They wanted to change that paradigm. So what we did is we extracted a lot of the historical data from different systems. I'll come in and share with you which data we extracted. We then used that using a Predictive Analytics modules to create qualified opportunities, and we directly moved this into their CRM systems. This is a very important aspect for them because they help them be productive. What they realized is amazing. For every person they contacted, they had over 60% of their customers ask for a quote. Of that 60%, more than 40% have been placing orders at a remarkable rate of conversion. We had Bill Dubé, the CEO, give us an unbelievably great compliment as a result, which is he just was simply astonished at the kind of intelligence we extracted from what he thought was previously useless data. That's the kind of magic predictive analytics can do for you, and that's what I want to share with you. So let me show you how we do it. We start with fundamental data that you have today. If you've been in business for a long time, you will have a lot of data that resides in different systems, your ERP systems, your shipping data, your order data, your field service data that exists in modules such as ServiceMax, your CRM data, your contact center data. All this is incredibly valuable because it has information about customers and products and all the interactions that you have with them. We then move this data securely into our cloud application. That's where all the magic happens. We have 3 or 4 different critical modules that we use there. First and foremost is what we call an auto discovery engine. This is important because one of the things we learned over time is that relying on bills and materials to know what goes with what is really, really hard for most companies because bills and materials tend to be inaccurate pretty quickly. So we have an auto discovery engine that does that. It parses the data to figure out the relationships. We then put this information into what we call our own CRM of things, upon which we have a predictive analytics engine and machine learning environments that go in and discover different patterns. So the entire science of entitlement automation is based on pattern recognition, discovering how different customers behave by industry type, by product type, by usage type, and based on those patterns, we start drawing predictive values. We then turn around and create our own entitlement automation output, which we move into a couple of different outcomes. We could put in a sales automation engine, like a Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, or marketing automation, which, again, there's many tools out there. And what we're most excited about right now is what many of our customers have asked us for, is moving it into the ServiceMax module directly. Okay? This can now show up directly into the field technician's queue, where he or she can act upon it every time they go to a customer site. So let me show you a couple of different opportunities out here. So if you were to look at a service module in ServiceMax, there's a bunch of different things that this would show. First and foremost, the history for the customer that showed what we sold them. This is information that, for example, that they were able to purchase that they had purchased from the customer over time. We then turn around and ask them who to contact, and then we provide them some information on the kinds of things that they ought to be able to sell. There's historical information that matters as well, and that's what most of our customers want to see. Let me show you a bit more information that shows very specifically how this will work in practice. Great. So one of the things that this is based upon, that our entitled science is based upon, is what we call the creation or development of the entitlement gap. For us, the entitlement gap is simply the difference between what they actually do versus what they ought to be doing, or the entitlement. So on this chart, for example, this is the portal that we've created ourselves for our customers. There is an actual performance line out here. So if you imagine on the left-hand side, on the y-axis is the revenue per customer, and this line here is a live data that shows what each customer has done in that preceding quarter. Using our data science, we then create what we call the entitlement values. Each of these lines here, each of the data points is also real live data by each customer, what they ought to be buying in that particular quarter. And then all we do then is compute what we call an entitlement gap. So if you were a sales manager or a territory manager or salesperson for that particular territory, you can look at this and you can simply take all these data away and start simply looking at what the entitlement gaps are for that region. In this example, for example, Torp, Off Their Heart and Man, which is a customer for this company, has an entitlement gap of about $1,800 for that quarter. And it now starts giving information on where to get this data. If I were to then take a view at the macro level, at a geographic level, and if I were a sales manager for the U.S. and say, look, where are my biggest sources of entitlement for this company? This is a pump company. This is a made-up hypothetical pump company. We look at this information and say, look, it looks like California and Texas have some pretty large opportunities for us. Let's go figure out where these opportunities are. When you hover over Texas, you can see on the right-hand side, there's a few customers that are the ones that have the highest entitlement. Well, let's go back and look in Texas where the opportunities may be. I'm now going into Harris County, City of Houston, and there are these 5 customers that show as the highest potential companies out here. When I click down upon Houston, I'll say, okay, now I can see all my customer accounts in this region and what they can do for us. Let's pick on Abbott & Sons. When I click on Abbott & Sons to figure out what they're doing, I can now come across this information that says, wait a minute, Abbott & Sons has 2 different locations that have potential for us to sell. In one location at zip code 77043, they have an entitlement value of $3,600, and they've done an actual purchases of $1,200. They also have another location at 77040 that has simply never bought anything from us recently and has about a $4,000 value. If I were to scroll down and look at this data in Abbott & Sons, it looks like I can sell them casings worth about $150 because they are something that they need to be buying right away. And when I go down into the order history, I can see why the casings are an opportunity. It's been about 1,500 days since they last purchased it. The purchase interval for this, using the pattern recognition technology we talked about earlier, was about 1,300 days, which means they're about 180 days overdue. Using statistics, it tells us that they're about 85% or 83% potential to convert as a customer. This is powerful information for a service tech or a salesperson in the field. Additionally, we give them a lot of data on what their historical transactions are below this, and these are the kinds of information that we share with ServiceMax as well, directly into the application. Let me go back to the presentation for a second here. So the natural progression, if you may, in this set is, so what about implementation? How long does it take? What do you do about it? Well, we built this application in a way and the process in a way that is relatively lightweight for our customers. We started with the diagnostics that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. We focus on a product line, we focus on region, and the idea is to scope out the opportunity, both the size and the scope of the opportunity that may exist in the install base. Once the diagnostic is done, we then move into a pilot, proof of concept pilot, which usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks, primarily because we want the customer to have sufficient time to follow up on the opportunities, to figure out what needs to happen, to then go about discovering the different processes, improvements, and other things they may need to do in their own operation to make this thing work. We wind up providing 3 sets of opportunities to the customer. It could be directly into the service text queue through ServiceMax. It could be into Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or the CRM of choice, or it could be into marketing automation where they may decide to start email campaigns into the install base. That's a very common way of doing things. Once that's done, they then move into an implementation phase, which is then you start doing the rollout, which is you may decide by geography, by product type, when do you want to start rolling out this application across your sales teams or service teams. So this is the process we follow in terms of rolling out the predictive analytics to our customer base. So as a way to summarize this, entitlement automation is really a foundation of what we can do to help drive service revenue in the install base. As I said, there are 3 Ps we strongly believe in. It's being predictive, so you can be proactive and therefore preemptive. And when you pull that together, it's a pretty powerful combination for our customers and therefore value for you as well. You can get my contact information from this webinar afterwards. I'm happy to answer any questions directly today, as well as after the webinar via this information that's listed by email or through our Twitter handle or by LinkedIn. Thanks a lot, Jonathan.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Vivek. It's pretty amazing what you just shared with us. As a marketer, I'm like enthused to see we could use a solution like that to reach back out to our customers with that predictive information. It's the hot button within marketing too. Okay, so folks, you can go ahead and submit your questions online. We did receive a couple questions as Vivek was presenting, so we'll start taking those now. Again, you go to the green hover over the green bar at the top of your screen, click on Q&A and submit your question there. one of the first questions is, or kind of scenario is, our company has gone through some acquisitions and we have different systems in place. You know, our data is very messy with duplicate records. How do you work with that, or how do you help consolidate that data to work with it?
Well, that's actually a great question, and this is an incredibly common scenario in our customer base. A lot of the companies we've worked with have had acquisitions over the years, or for the matter, have had system changes over the years, which means you will have information lying in different systems. We've worked with one particular customer, a large commercial refrigeration company. They had 7 systems, and we were able to extract data pretty seamlessly from these 7 systems. It takes a few days of work, but we're able to extract this data. And then the changes on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis, come from the latest system of record, which invariably tends to be one of the more modern ERP systems. So the process is not hard. We've had customers from whom we've extracted data within a day or two to within a couple of weeks. It just depends on the complexity. But thanks to modern-day extraction, transformation, and loading tools, ETL tools, it's much easier these days.
Okay, great. Looks like one from one of our customers. They're using ServiceMax and Salesforce. Can you use the data that's there, or do you need to write reports to get to that data?
Well, that's a great question. So if you remember the chart I showed in how we get the data from the different systems, we extract data from not just ERP systems, but we extract data from CRM or ServiceMax systems as well. So the data model is incredibly easy for us to extract data. We have connectors written using the APIs that ServiceMax and Salesforce have developed. And from that, it's easy for us to move that data into our own data model. So extracting data to and from ServiceMax and Salesforce is not a problem at all, and we do that on a very regular basis.
Okay, great. Another question came in online, and the question is, are there patterns you've seen by industry?
That's actually a great question. So, you know, when we tend to be in the middle of an operating business, we tend to have rules of thumb, right? The companies in XYZ sector happen to replace in such and such time. The companies in a particular market tend to operate in these cycles. And so when we start doing this analysis that I showed you in the portal, we look at the data from multiple angles. We look at it by product type. We look at it by industry type. We look at it by time. And in each of these, along each of these dimensions, we see actual patterns. And so we have a customer who is a large instrumentation company. They sell into multiple industries, I think 7 or 8 major markets. And we see clear patterns. In this particular case, we are helping them identify replacement consumables. And for them, we have seen clear patterns of replacement rates. In a particular industry, there are replacement rates as little as 75 days. In other industries, as much as 365 days. And it all is driven by usage type. It's all driven by application type, and it's driven by product type. And so we start seeing these clear patterns. And the question you asked is very powerful, because one of the single biggest things we do in terms of pattern recognition is what patterns do for us is start identifying clusters of like behavior. And that like behavior is a really powerful signal for us to use to act upon. So we start looking for like behavior that says, customers in academia tend to operate this way. They tend to replace these things every 400 days. So now let's go look for all the customers in academia who are not replacing it every 400 days and go find them. So we look for similars, and then from there we look dissimilars, and then go act upon them. So we see clear patterns. There's clear discrimination between industries, statistically valid data that's different, and that's how we act upon it. Great question.
Okay, good. Another question that came in. It appears that having accurate material use data per service, transaction, or repair is critical to the success of how your solution works to your algorithm. Is that true?
Yes and no. We would all love perfect data, but we also know we all live in an imperfect world. Our thesis is that as long as there is a statistically valid sample size that allows us to create insight, that's what we look for. So we know that data within corporations is riddled with noise, riddled with errors. And so all we're looking for is a sufficiently large sample size out of that set that allows us to extract this insight. So we may say, look, if you have 2 million transactions, there ought to be at least about 200,000 transactions that are clean, 10%, 15%. We do the statistical analysis around that to discover the right sample size. And from that sample size, we can then make inferences. So no, we don't need perfection because we recognize that that simply won't happen.
Okay, great. It's like one or two more questions here. How long does it take for a typical implementation? I think you might have covered this. But.
Yeah, that's a great question. We covered this, and I think it depends on how ready you are along the maturity model, if you may. A lot of what we see is less about the data as much about the readiness on the maturity line, because most companies can extract data relatively quickly. We've literally done it as little as in an afternoon to as much as 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the relatively easy part. The hard part is in the maturity process would say, are you ready to then go from reactive to proactive? Have you set your processes up? Do you know what you need to do organizationally? And that's the hard part. So we discovered every time we have trouble on the implementation, it is about the roles and responsibilities in the change management process as you go through this thing. Right? And so if you're ready mentally and philosophically get to proactive, then your organization lines up much better. That's where we see the biggest issues on the timeline. Then when we get to production, it's a matter of being able to create these opportunities every single day, every single week. So that's the easy part.
Okay, good. And looks like our last question here. You showed a screenshot of an opportunity within ServiceMax and a demo of the Entitle system, but do you have to use Entitle in addition to ServiceMax, or can everything be accessed through ServiceMax? Everything can be accessed through ServiceMax. The demo shot we showed is a clear opportunity that exists in the ServiceMax data model. So we show that there, and that's an easy integration that's been done. There's a lot of dashboards that we show, which now we can build in the ServiceMax and Salesforce environment. So we built our own portal mostly to show people what we do, not as a production portal, but it's also used in the pilot phase. Sometimes people don't want to use their own systems, so we take the data and stick it into our system for the pilot implementation. So the short answer is ServiceMax is the way to go. Awesome. Great. Thank you. There are no further questions at this time. If you think of additional questions or have them as you listen to the recording, perhaps, feel free to email Vivek directly. He's provided his email address here. You can also email Jonathan directly. He is jonathan.skelding@servicemax.com. There's always just the info@servicemax.com is available too. So that concludes today's webinar. As I mentioned, we will be providing you the replay via email. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great morning or afternoon. Thank you, Cole.